June 6, 1944. Dawn breaks over the cliffs of Normandy. A thick grey fog clings to the coastline, blurring the line between sea and sky. The rhythmic pounding of waves is broken by distant artillery, the staccato thunder of German guns echoing across the sands. Landing craft, brimming with men and supplies, surge forward, engines straining against the churning tide. Soldiers, drenched and trembling, grip rifles, faces etched with fear and determination. Some glance at the horizon where airborne troops are descending in parachutes, landing behind enemy lines. Tanks follow close behind, slowly grinding onto the beaches, their tracks carving deep ruts in sand soaked with salt water and blood. Every moment is a test of courage, improvisation, and adaptation. The U.S. Army, still relatively new to global combat, must learn, adjust, and overcome, here now amid chaos and fire. This is where America's greatest transformation begins. From inexperienced divisions to a war machine capable of reshaping the world, every innovation, every risk, every decision on this morning would echo far beyond these shores. The battle would not just be fought with weapons, it would be fought with the will to adapt faster than the enemy. January 1940. Across Europe, the storm of war had already engulfed nations. France braced against the German blitzkrieg, Poland had fallen, and Britain clung to the English Channel as its last barrier. In stark contrast, the United States watched from across the Atlantic, a nation at peace, yet increasingly aware that the world was being reshaped by unprecedented violence. The U.S. Army, numbering fewer than 200,000 men in peacetime, was small, underfunded, and largely oriented toward domestic security. Training was rudimentary, doctrine conservative, and mechanization limited. The looming threat of global conflict forced the War Department to consider an urgent expansion. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, acutely aware of the Axis advance, ordered selective mobilization, but America was still grappling with isolationist sentiment. Industrial capacity was immense, but translating factories from civilian production to war materiel would take time. Initial military exercises revealed glaring deficiencies. Units struggled with basic coordination, artillery was outdated, and communication systems lagged behind modern battlefield needs. December 7, 1941, changed everything. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor shattered complacency. Battleships burned, planes exploded in flames, and over 2,400 servicemen were killed in a single morning. The shock was nationwide. Overnight, a peacetime army became a nation at war. Mobilization accelerated with a speed previously unimagined. Draft calls surged, recruitment offices overflowed, and factories pivoted from producing cars and appliances to tanks, aircraft, and munitions. The U.S. military faced challenges on multiple fronts. In Europe, Germany dominated with mechanized divisions, armored spearheads, and sophisticated artillery. In the Pacific, Japan's navy and air power threatened American outposts, from the Philippines to Midway. The army, initially inexperienced in large-scale amphibious operations, had to rapidly learn strategies for combined land-sea-air warfare. Every battlefield decision now carried enormous stakes. Failures meant territory lost, lives wasted, and momentum ceded to a ruthless enemy. Key figures emerged to navigate this unprecedented challenge. General George C. Marshall, Army Chief of Staff, orchestrated the expansion, balancing politics, logistics, and battlefield necessity. Admiral Ernest King and General Douglas MacArthur would soon define Pacific operations, while General Dwight D. Eisenhower prepared to lead massive joint campaigns in Europe. Their coordination, planning, and ability to implement rapid organizational change would become a hallmark of American adaptation. Yet the initial months were a trial by fire. Training programs were hastily expanded. Soldiers were often sent to battle with minimal combat experience. Equipment shortages plagued units, and early confrontations, such as the failed landings in the Philippines and early North Africa campaigns, exposed both strategic gaps and the urgent need for innovation. The U.S. Army had to evolve faster than any other force in history, learning not only from its own mistakes, but also from enemy tactics. By mid-1942, the first signs of transformation began to appear. Amphibious exercises honed the techniques for projecting force onto hostile shores. Specialized units, such as the 1st Ranger Battalion and airborne divisions, were formed to exploit mobility, surprise, and concentrated firepower. Tank development accelerated. The M4 Sherman, though initially flawed, was quickly adapted to counter German armor. Engineers, logisticians, and intelligence officers worked tirelessly to ensure supply lines could support global operations. This early stage of adaptation was not only technical but cultural. Soldiers and officers had to internalize new doctrines, adjust to fast-paced decision-making, and embrace risk in unfamiliar environments. The U.S. Army was learning to operate on a global scale, synchronizing movements across continents, coordinating with naval and air forces, and integrating new technology into every level of combat. By the end of 1942, it was clear the U.S. Army was no longer a modest peacetime force. It had become a learning organism, capable of rapid transformation. Every failure was a lesson, every success a blueprint. The foundation was laid for an army that would soon project power from the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, adapting faster than any enemy could anticipate. The stage was set for the next phase of transformation, the deliberate structuring of units, industrial support, and battlefield tactics that would define the U.S. Army's rise. By early 1942, the U.S. Army had entered a phase of rapid transformation. The shock of Pearl Harbor had forced the nation to confront its military unpreparedness, but it also ignited an unprecedented wave of mobilization. Recruitment offices overflowed with volunteers, and the draft expanded the ranks exponentially. Within months, the Army swelled from fewer than 200,000 men to more than 1 million, a figure that would continue to grow as the war progressed. This sudden expansion required more than numbers. It demanded structure, training, and innovation at a pace few could have imagined. Training camps across the United States became crucibles of adaptation. Camp Shelby in Mississippi, Fort Benning in Georgia, and Fort Bragg in North Carolina transformed raw recruits into disciplined soldiers, often in as little as 12 weeks. Drill instructors emphasized not only marksmanship and physical endurance, but also flexibility. Soldiers had to learn to operate in a variety of environments, from the jungles of the Pacific to the frozen forests of Europe. Specialized units emerged. The Rangers, modeled on British commandos, were trained for precision raids and sabotage. Airborne divisions perfected parachute insertion behind enemy lines, a tactic untested at this scale in modern warfare. Technology and equipment evolved alongside personnel. The M4 Sherman tank, mass-produced in factories stretching from Michigan to California, became the backbone of armored warfare. Initial models struggled against German Panthers and Tigers, but engineers responded with continual upgrades, thicker armor, more powerful guns, and specialized variants for mine-clearing and amphibious operations. Aircraft such as the P-38 Lightning and B-17 Flying Fortress were deployed with a focus on precision and support for ground operations. Communications equipment, previously cumbersome, was miniaturized and integrated into units, allowing real-time coordination that had been impossible in 1941. Industrial mobilization was a critical element of adaptation. Factories that once produced automobiles, radios, and household goods were rapidly converted to churn out tanks, artillery, and ammunition. The War Production Board coordinated efforts across private industry, ensuring that technological advancements reached the battlefield as quickly as possible. Shipyards, too, worked around the clock, producing Liberty ships, landing craft, and carriers to transport men and material to distant theaters. Logistics became a science. Supply chains spanning the Atlantic and Pacific were developed, maintained, and refined, often under fire. By mid-1942, U.S. forces were beginning to see the fruits of this transformation in active operations. In North Africa, American troops landed in Operation Torch, confronting seasoned German and Italian units. Early setbacks exposed gaps in coordination and experience, but the Army's rapid learning cycle was evident. Lessons from Tobruk, Casablanca, and the Kasserine Pass were analyzed, and units adjusted tactics almost immediately. Officers implemented decentralized command structures, allowing platoons and companies to make tactical decisions in real time, a major departure from rigid peacetime doctrine. The Pacific Theater demanded yet another layer of innovation. Amphibious landings required close coordination between Army, Navy, and Marine units. The Army Corps of Engineers developed specialized landing craft, while naval gunfire support evolved to soften enemy positions before troops arrived on beaches. Jungle warfare forced improvisation. Soldiers learned to construct supply caches in dense terrain, navigate rivers and swamps, and deal with disease and harsh climates. The lessons learned on Guadalcanal, New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands would become templates for all subsequent Pacific operations. Adaptation was not limited to strategy and equipment, it extended to organizational culture. The U.S. Army fostered an environment that encouraged observation, feedback, and innovation at every level. Junior officers were empowered to report battlefield realities, engineers responded with rapid technological solutions, and commanders adjusted operational plans daily. This flexible mindset distinguished the U.S. Army from more rigid adversaries, allowing it to respond effectively to unexpected challenges. By late 1942, the stage was set. The U.S. Army had transformed from a small peacetime force into a learning, adaptive machine. Training, technology, industrial capacity, and organizational flexibility combined to create a force capable of projecting power across multiple theaters simultaneously. Every challenge faced, every battle fought, became an opportunity to refine tactics and tools, laying the groundwork for the sweeping campaigns that would follow in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. This phase of adaptation naturally sets the stage for an in-depth examination of the angles of U.S. Army transformation: human, tactical, technological, and leadership, revealing the multifaceted approach that made America's military the fastest adapting force of the war. The human element was the heartbeat of America's rapid adaptation. Soldiers arriving at camps in 1942 were often teenagers or men in their early 20s, many with no prior combat experience. Yet, under the relentless pressure of training and wartime necessity, they evolved into disciplined, resilient combatants. Drill instructors instilled not only skill, but a mindset of flexibility and initiative. In the jungles of Guadalcanal or on the beaches of Normandy, soldiers had to make split-second decisions in environments their predecessors had never faced. Fear was constant, but it was harnessed, transformed into focus. Letters home reveal exhaustion, anxiety, and longing, but also determination and pride. The human capacity to endure, improvise, and learn quickly became the Army's most powerful asset. Tactical innovation emerged as a direct response to the challenges of global warfare. Early engagements in North Africa exposed critical gaps in coordination between infantry, armor, and artillery. Lessons learned there were rapidly codified into doctrine. The U.S. Army pioneered combined arms tactics, integrating tanks, infantry, engineers, and artillery into cohesive units capable of maneuvering against entrenched enemies. In the Pacific, island-hopping operations demanded novel strategies. Amphibious landings were preceded by intense reconnaissance, naval bombardment, and coordinated airstrikes. Small units conducted night raids, patrols, and flanking maneuvers, exploiting enemy weaknesses. Flexibility became doctrine. Plans were meticulously prepared, but never rigid, allowing commanders to adapt instantly to changing conditions. Technological adaptation was equally critical. American industry's capacity for innovation was unmatched. The M4 Sherman tank, mass-produced but continuously upgraded, exemplified this principle. Its initial armor and firepower were insufficient against German Tiger and Panther tanks, yet engineers rapidly designed variants with thicker plating, improved guns, and flame-throwing attachments for close-quarters combat. Artillery, radios, and vehicles were similarly modified to meet battlefield realities. Aviation evolved in tandem. The P-38 Lightning and P-51 Mustang gained superior range and firepower, enabling long-range escort missions that protected bombers over Europe. The B-17 and B-24 heavy bombers were integrated into precision bombing campaigns, with intelligence and reconnaissance feeding real-time adjustments to mission planning. Communications networks became a battlefield advantage. Encrypted radios allowed units to coordinate maneuvers across miles of hostile terrain, drastically reducing response times. These three angles, human, tactical, and technological, intersected seamlessly. Soldiers trained to operate new equipment under flexible tactics. Technology evolved in response to human feedback and tactical requirements. And tactics were constantly revised to leverage both human skill and technological advantage. A sergeant on the front lines might direct a Sherman to support an infantry advance while relaying coordinates via radio to artillery units miles away. Decisions were instantaneous, based on observations and analysis rather than rigid command. This synergy accelerated learning and amplified effectiveness, turning inexperience into innovation. The Army's capacity for adaptation was also visible in logistics and planning. Supply chains were designed to respond dynamically to battlefield conditions. Landing craft, trucks, and transport planes ensured that forward units received reinforcements and supplies exactly when needed. Engineers created bridges over rivers under fire, constructed makeshift airstrips, and repaired bombed-out ports, allowing the Army to maintain operational momentum. Technological solutions were applied with tactical intent. Flamethrowers cleared bunkers, amphibious vehicles overcame reefs and tides, and portable radios linked dispersed units. Human ingenuity and mechanical innovation worked hand in hand. On the ground, adaptation was personal. Soldiers improvised solutions to unforeseen problems daily, extracting wounded under fire, patching vehicles, navigating uncharted terrain. Each success, each failure, became a lesson shared across the Army. Manuals and doctrine evolved in real time, informed not just by generals in command centers, but by the experiences of those confronting the enemy directly. The Army became a living organism, capable of learning faster than its adversaries, adjusting tactics, technology, and training almost simultaneously. By late 1943, the cumulative effect of human resilience, tactical evolution, and technological innovation was evident. Units were no longer rigid formations. They were flexible, responsive, and coordinated. Soldiers trained to adapt instinctively, leaders empowered subordinates to innovate, and engineers delivered tools that solved immediate problems. Across Europe and the Pacific, the U.S. Army demonstrated a remarkable ability to transform setbacks into opportunity. Battles that might have stalled slower armies became lessons that propelled American forces forward. This intricate interplay of human, tactical, and technological adaptation set the stage for the next angles: leadership, enemy response, and moral considerations, which together reveal how the U.S. Army not only adapted but anticipated and outmaneuvered its adversaries. Leadership was the compass guiding America's rapid adaptation. General George C. Marshall, as Army Chief of Staff, orchestrated the monumental task of expanding, training, and equipping a peacetime army for global warfare. His vision was both strategic and systemic. He emphasized flexibility, decentralization, and rapid problem-solving. Commanders in the field, from Dwight D. Eisenhower in Europe to Douglas MacArthur in the Pacific, executed campaigns with remarkable autonomy, empowered to adjust tactics as conditions demanded. Leaders such as George S. Patton embodied this principle on the battlefield, combining audacity with precise coordination, pushing units to innovate under pressure. Their decisions were informed by real-time reports, reconnaissance, and intelligence, creating a feedback loop that accelerated learning across entire theaters of war. Leadership, in essence, became a force multiplier, transforming inexperience into operational competence. Understanding the enemy was another axis of adaptation. German forces relied on blitzkrieg tactics, mechanized divisions, and entrenched positions. Japanese forces excelled in jungle warfare, night attacks, and fanatical defense. The U.S. Army studied these approaches rigorously, analyzing every engagement to extract lessons. After the crushing defeat at Kasserine Pass in Tunisia, American commanders reassessed command structures, communication protocols, and armor infantry coordination, implementing changes within weeks. In the Pacific, experiences on Guadalcanal highlighted the deadly effectiveness of Japanese ambushes and night attacks. Soldiers and planners responded by developing small unit tactics, night reconnaissance techniques, and coordinated artillery and air support. Adapting to the enemy's strengths, rather than simply reacting, became a hallmark of the U.S. Army's approach. Moral considerations shaped every decision in this adaptive framework. Commanders faced constant dilemmas: how to balance speed with minimizing casualties, how to deploy overwhelming force without destroying infrastructure unnecessarily, how to maintain morale in the face of extreme hardship. Soldiers were taught not only to fight, but to endure, improvise, and protect one another. Psychological resilience was as crucial as physical preparedness. Letters, diaries, and oral histories from the front lines reveal soldiers negotiating fear and hope simultaneously, forging bonds that allowed units to operate efficiently under extreme stress. Adaptation was not merely tactical, it was human, ethical, and emotional. Innovation extended to the integration of combined arms and joint operations. Army leaders coordinated closely with the Navy and Air Force, ensuring that landings, bombardments, and air support were synchronized with precision. Amphibious operations, such as those in North Africa, Sicily, and Normandy, were not simple repetitions. Each incorporated lessons from prior engagements. Engineers developed specialized landing craft, tanks, and flamethrower variants to address fortified positions, while air support provided real-time intelligence to frontline commanders. This integration demanded not only technological coordination, but the cultivation of trust and communication across branches, a human and organizational adaptation critical to operational success. Enemy analysis fueled a constant cycle of innovation. The U.S. Army monitored German tank production, Japanese supply lines, and battlefield doctrine, anticipating moves before they occurred. This intelligence-driven approach allowed planners to design operations that leveraged American strengths against enemy weaknesses. In Europe, Sherman tanks, artillery, and infantry were deployed to exploit gaps in German defensive lines. In the Pacific, amphibious and jungle warfare tactics countered Japanese fortifications and ambush strategies. The Army's ability to predict and outmaneuver opponents was as much a result of organizational learning as it was of individual skill. Leadership, enemy adaptation, and moral considerations intersected in profound ways on the battlefield. Decisions were rarely abstract. They involved lives, equipment, and strategic outcomes simultaneously. A colonel ordering a flanking maneuver considered the terrain, enemy positions, unit cohesion, equipment readiness, and the psychological state of his men. Leaders adapted doctrine to human capability and battlefield reality. Meanwhile, soldiers internalized these lessons, improvising under fire, adjusting formations, and communicating observations that fed back into higher-level planning. This dynamic created a continuous loop of adaptation, turning the U.S. Army into a force that learned faster than its adversaries. By the end of 1943, the convergence of leadership, enemy analysis, and moral judgment had transformed the U.S. Army into a disciplined, adaptive, and innovative fighting force. It was no longer simply a collection of divisions. It was a living, responsive organization capable of anticipating challenges, overcoming setbacks, and exploiting opportunities. The human, tactical, technological, and leadership dimensions were no longer separate. They functioned as an integrated system, the core of what would become America's fastest adapting army in history. This comprehensive understanding of the Army's adaptive capabilities naturally leads into the climax/turning point. The decisive campaigns where lessons, leadership, and innovation converged to produce pivotal victories in Europe and the Pacific. June 6, 1944. The beaches of Normandy became the proving ground for the U.S. Army's rapid adaptation. Months of training, planning, and technological refinement converged in a single, audacious operation, the largest amphibious invasion in human history. At dawn, The roar of naval bombardments echoed across Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juneau, and Sword beaches. American soldiers, bracing against tidal currents and relentless enemy fire, advanced into a maelstrom of sand, steel, and blood. Landing craft delivered not just troops, but the culmination of years of innovation: specialized tanks, portable bridges, flamethrowers, and mobile artillery designed to overcome fortified positions. The initial hours were chaotic. Machine gun fire tore through ranks, obstacles slowed armored support, and communication lines faltered under pressure. Yet the lessons of North Africa, Sicily, and training exercises across England ensured that leaders and soldiers adapted in real time. Small unit commanders made autonomous decisions, rerouted reinforcements, and coordinated artillery strikes with unprecedented speed. Tanks overcame unexpected terrain obstacles. Medics improvised evacuation routes. Every failure prompted immediate solutions. Every unexpected challenge tested and proved the Army's capacity to learn under fire. Simultaneously, across the Atlantic and Pacific theaters, adaptation shaped campaigns. On Guadalcanal, the 1st Marine Division and Army engineers faced dense jungles, malaria, and relentless Japanese counterattacks. American forces quickly learned to coordinate infantry, artillery, and air support in confined, unpredictable terrain. Patrols scouted river crossings and entrenched positions, while engineers constructed supply caches and improvised landing zones. The island became a laboratory of rapid tactical evolution, forcing soldiers and commanders to innovate continuously. In North Africa, lessons from the initial Kasserine Pass disaster were applied decisively. Patton and Montgomery coordinated armored advances with air reconnaissance, artillery, and infantry maneuvers, cutting off German supply lines and exploiting vulnerabilities in Axis formations. Here, adaptation was both strategic and operational. Units altered formations under fire, leveraged terrain advantages, and utilized newly upgraded Sherman tanks in coordinated assaults. Communication networks allowed real-time adjustments, and intelligence officers fed actionable data directly to field commanders. The U.S. Army's ability to integrate new lessons, technologies, and tactics in real time marked a turning point in the Mediterranean campaign. Technological adaptation also reached its peak during these decisive engagements. In Europe, portable radios allowed commanders to coordinate tank and infantry movements with precision previously thought impossible. Engineers developed bulldozers, bridging equipment, and mine-clearing vehicles, enabling forces to advance through heavily fortified terrain. In the Pacific, amphibious vehicles and flamethrower-equipped tanks were essential in overcoming bunkers and coral reefs. The iterative process of battlefield innovation, observe, analyze, implement, and adapt, had become embedded in the operational DNA of the U.S. Army. The human dimension amplified these advantages. Soldiers, having internalized lessons from prior failures, displayed initiative under extreme conditions. When communications failed or units were pinned down, non-commissioned officers directed movements, improvised maneuvers, and maintained morale. Fatigue, fear, and confusion were ever present, yet the soldiers' resilience ensured continuity of action. On Iwo Jima, for instance, small units coordinated silently, advancing under withering fire, while medics, engineers, and artillery teams synchronized their support with uncanny efficiency. Adaptation was no longer theoretical, it was alive in the mud, smoke, and fire of the battlefield. The convergence of human ingenuity, tactical evolution, and technological advancement was evident in every theater. The Normandy landings, the North African push, and Pacific Island campaigns were not isolated events. They were manifestations of an army learning at a pace unmatched in military history. Each battle tested doctrine, equipment, and leadership, forcing immediate recalibration. Where the Axis relied on rigid structures and established routines, the U.S. Army thrived on responsiveness, turning challenges into advantages. By the fall of 1944, these efforts coalesced into decisive momentum. American forces had broken through German defenses in Normandy, pushed Axis powers from North Africa, and advanced across the Pacific with a methodical, adaptive strategy. The combination of planning, innovation, and human resilience was not just winning battles, it was redefining warfare itself. This relentless advance set the stage for the second phase of the climax, the decisive moments and outcomes, where the U.S. Army's ability to adapt would determine the collapse of Axis resistance in Europe and the Pacific, reshaping the global balance of power. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes forest, Belgium, a biting winter wind cut through the pine trees as American troops prepared for what would become the Battle of the Bulge. German forces launched a surprise offensive, aiming to split Allied lines and seize Antwerp. For the U.S. Army, still adapting to the realities of large-scale European combat, the attack was a test of everything it had learned. Units were outnumbered and surrounded, communication lines disrupted, and supplies stretched thin. Yet, decades of rapid adaptation, training, technological integration, and decentralized command enabled soldiers and commanders to respond with resilience. Small units held key road junctions, artillery batteries repositioned under fire, and armored divisions maneuvered through narrow forest paths, cutting off enemy advances. Within weeks, the offensive was blunted, illustrating the U.S. Army's growing capacity to absorb shock and strike decisively. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Iwo Jima became a crucible of adaptation. The island's volcanic terrain and Japanese fortifications challenged every assumption of amphibious assault. American forces, anticipating resistance, deployed flamethrower tanks, bulldozers, and specialized artillery to neutralize bunkers and caves. Soldiers adapted tactics on the fly. Flame teams coordinated with infantry to clear entrenched positions, engineers created supply pathways under fire, and medics developed rapid triage procedures for high-casualty scenarios. Each adjustment, born of necessity, amplified effectiveness. By the end of March 1945, after 5 weeks of grueling combat, the island was secured, demonstrating how human ingenuity, technological innovation, and tactical flexibility coalesced in extreme conditions. In Europe, the liberation of France and the advance into Germany highlighted another dimension of adaptation: operational tempo. American forces, learning from the slow, methodical advances earlier in Normandy, accelerated movement while maintaining coordination across divisions. Patton's Third Army became the embodiment of rapid adaptation, executing swift armored thrusts that encircled German units, cutting off supply and retreat routes. Infantry and engineers followed closely, clearing obstacles, repairing bridges, and establishing supply lines. Simultaneously, intelligence units intercepted German communications, allowing for preemptive tactical decisions. The combination of speed, coordination, and adaptive problem-solving made these operations far more effective than static assaults. The convergence of adaptation was equally visible in logistics and technology. In Europe, mobile maintenance units repaired Sherman tanks in the field, preventing operational pauses. Engineers bridged rivers under enemy fire, while supply convoys ensured ammunition, fuel, and rations reached frontline troops without delay. In the Pacific, naval transport adapted to island terrain. Landing craft and amphibious tractors overcame reefs and sandbars, while portable airstrips allowed aircraft to provide immediate support. The Army's ability to adapt to both terrain and enemy tactics ensured sustained offensive pressure, gradually eroding Axis defenses. The human factor remained central. Soldiers endured extreme fatigue, freezing temperatures, and relentless enemy attacks. Yet, the institutional emphasis on decentralized decision-making empowered low-level commanders to act independently, improvise, and maintain cohesion. Medics and support personnel innovated under pressure, developing evacuation routes and field treatment methods that minimized casualties. Psychological resilience, honed through months of rigorous training and exposure to smaller-scale engagements, proved decisive. The U.S. Army had cultivated not only skill and technology, but a culture of adaptability that transformed ordinary men into effective, self-reliant units. By the spring of 1945, the results were undeniable. In Europe, American forces had penetrated the Siegfried Line, crossed the Rhine, and advanced deep into the heart of Germany. Cities fell, and Axis resistance collapsed under relentless adaptive operations. In the Pacific, the capture of Iwo Jima and Okinawa positioned the US for the eventual invasion of Japan, demonstrating the Army's capacity to project power across vast distances and diverse environments. The combination of leadership, technology, tactics, and human resilience had transformed the US Army into a force capable of overwhelming even the most entrenched enemies. These decisive moments marked not only the culmination of battlefield campaigns, but also a transformation in the very nature of modern warfare. The US Army's ability to learn, adapt, and implement solutions faster than its adversaries became a defining factor in Allied victory. Where rigid hierarchies and outdated tactics hampered German and Japanese responses, the American system thrived on flexibility, innovation, and rapid feedback. By mid-1945, the Army had become more than a military force. It had become a war machine in the truest sense, capable of evolving at the pace demanded by global conflict. This relentless combination of strategy, technology, human initiative, and leadership naturally leads into the aftermath of the war. The costs, consequences, and enduring lessons of an army that adapted faster than any in history. May 1945. Across the shattered cities and countryside of Europe, silence settled over battlefields that had once roared with artillery, explosions, and the cries of men in combat. The US Army, having executed campaigns across multiple theaters, emerged victorious, but the cost was immense. Over 400,000 American soldiers had been killed or wounded during World War II. Countless others bore psychological scars, enduring trauma that would echo long after the guns fell silent. Each casualty was a reminder of the human stakes behind strategy, technology, and adaptation. The rapid pace of operations, a hallmark of the Army's success, had exacted a heavy toll. Soldiers endured long marches, punishing terrain, and extreme weather, often without respite. On the beaches of Normandy, medics worked frantically, improvising under fire to treat grievous wounds. In the Pacific, the volcanic terrain of Iwo Jima and the dense jungles of Guadalcanal exposed troops to disease, exhaustion, and ambushes. Survival demanded not only skill and training, but ingenuity and adaptability. Every day, soldiers had to solve problems under fire, improvising cover, navigating unknown terrain, and maintaining unit cohesion under constant threat. The human cost extended beyond those at the front lines. Families at home endured anxiety, separation, and loss. Letters, diaries, and oral histories reveal a generation shaped by war, their resilience, hope, and determination reflected in the soldiers' ability to endure hardship and continue adapting in the most extreme conditions. Officers, engineers, and support personnel also faced extraordinary pressures. Decisions about supply routes, artillery placements, and troop movements often had life-or-death consequences, creating a constant moral burden. Equipment and materiel losses were also staggering. Tanks, artillery pieces, aircraft, and vehicles were destroyed or damaged at unprecedented rates. Yet, the Army's industrial adaptation minimized operational disruption. Field repairs, mobile maintenance units, and rapid production replacements ensured that battles could continue without delay. Supply chains, stretched across oceans and continents, had to account not only for forward troops, but also for the unpredictability of combat conditions. Each loss spurred innovation, from improved armor and weapon systems to more effective medical evacuation protocols. Casualties among Allied civilians were similarly devastating. Bombing campaigns in Germany and Japan, while tactically aimed at weakening enemy infrastructure, caused widespread destruction and suffering. In liberated territories, American forces were confronted with devastated communities, displaced populations, and the ethical challenges of administering occupied regions. Soldiers, engineers, and planners had to adapt to these social realities while maintaining operational effectiveness, balancing military necessity with humanitarian responsibility. The psychological impact on the Army itself was profound. Commanders had to absorb lessons not only from enemy tactics, but also from their own losses. units learned to reorganize quickly after heavy casualties, to implement tactical revisions in response to battlefield failures, and to maintain morale in the face of relentless pressure. This ability to adapt in the midst of human cost was a defining characteristic of the U.S. Army's evolution. Where other armies might have slowed, faltered, or become rigid under attrition, American forces turned loss into insight, sustaining momentum across multiple theaters. By the spring of 1945, the cumulative impact of these human and material costs was clear. Victory had been achieved, but it had been bought through resilience, innovation, and relentless adaptation. Soldiers, leaders, and support personnel had been tested to the limit, yet the lessons they learned about tactics, technology, and human endurance would shape not only the outcome of World War II, but also the future of warfare itself. This foundation naturally leads into Section 2 of Aftermath, which will explore strategic, geopolitical, and historical consequences, detailing how America's adaptive army reshaped the global balance of power and influenced post-war military doctrine. By mid-1945, the global landscape had been irrevocably altered. The U.S. Army, once a modest peacetime force, had demonstrated not only the ability to project power across multiple continents, but also the capacity to learn and innovate faster than any adversary. Victory in Europe and the Pacific confirmed that adaptability was as critical to success as manpower or firepower. American strategies, integrating intelligence, technology, and decentralized command, had outpaced German and Japanese responses, rendering traditional, rigid military hierarchies obsolete in modern warfare. The geopolitical consequences were immediate and profound. With Germany defeated and Japan on the brink of surrender, the United States emerged as a dominant global power. Its industrial and military capacity, combined with the lessons of rapid adaptation, positioned the U.S. to influence post-war reconstruction, geopolitical alignment, and the establishment of new international institutions such as the United Nations. The war had revealed the importance of integrating economic strength, technological innovation, and human capital into military strategy, a model the U.S. would continue to refine throughout the Cold War. Military doctrine itself underwent a transformation. The experiences of Normandy, the Ardennes, Guadalcanal, and Iwo Jima highlighted the effectiveness of flexible, decentralized command structures. Future U.S. military planning emphasized rapid adaptation, joint operations across services, and real-time intelligence integration. The lessons of combined arms, amphibious assault, and tactical improvisation became foundational, influencing training programs and operational planning for decades. The U.S. Army's institutional memory now contained a blueprint for transforming peacetime forces into fully capable, adaptable wartime machines. Technological progress, accelerated by battlefield necessity, also reshaped post-war military thought. The iterative upgrades to Sherman tanks, artillery systems, aircraft, and communications networks demonstrated the value of responsive engineering under pressure. Lessons learned in logistical coordination, supply chain management across oceans, forward repair, and mobile maintenance would become central to future expeditionary operations. The war had proven that technology alone was insufficient. Its integration with human decision-making, tactical innovation, and organizational flexibility was essential to operational success. The U.S. Army's rapid adaptation also influenced global perceptions of military effectiveness. Allies and adversaries alike recognized that the United States had mastered not just the tools of war, but the processes by which an army could learn, improve, and outmaneuver its enemy. The speed with which American forces integrated lessons from early failures, whether at Kasserine Pass, Guadalcanal, or Saipan, became a case study in modern military thought. Where Axis powers relied on rigid hierarchies and established doctrine, the U.S. emphasized iterative learning, decentralized decision-making, and technological integration. This contrast reshaped both strategic planning and military education worldwide. Finally, the psychological and cultural impact of this adaptive army was enduring. Soldiers who had endured extreme hardship carried their experience into civilian life, influencing leadership styles, industrial practices, and approaches to problem-solving. The Army itself institutionalized adaptability, ensuring that future generations of commanders could respond to uncertainty with flexibility and initiative. Beyond immediate victory, the U.S. Army's experience demonstrated that resilience, innovation, and learning at every level of an organization were as decisive as numerical superiority or firepower. By 1945, the United States had not only won the war, but had redefined what it meant to fight effectively in the modern era. Its army was faster, smarter, and more versatile than any opponent it had faced. The lessons of World War II would echo across decades, informing doctrine, technology, and strategy, establishing the United States as a permanent and adaptive military power on the world stage. This strategic and historical transformation sets the stage for a reflection/closure, examining the enduring significance of America's adaptive army, its lessons for humanity, warfare, and the evolution of military thought. History rarely offers such stark lessons in adaptation and resilience as it did during World War II. The United States, thrust from peacetime into global conflict, faced enemies who were experienced, disciplined, and ruthless. Yet, in the crucible of fire, sand, and jungle, the U.S. Army learned faster than any adversary. It transformed itself through a relentless cycle of observation, innovation, and application, turning inexperience into capability, chaos into opportunity. The essence of this transformation lay not merely in tanks, planes, or radios, but in the human capacity to adapt. Soldiers confronted fear, fatigue, and uncertainty daily, improvising solutions under fire, trusting their training, and relying on each other. Officers and enlisted men alike exercised judgment in ways unthinkable in peacetime, making decisions that could mean life or death for their comrades. Their courage, combined with institutional flexibility, created a feedback loop that propelled the Army forward at an unprecedented pace. Technological and tactical advancements were inseparable from this human dimension. Engineers responded to battlefield realities with rapid upgrades. Commanders adjusted strategies in real time. Every encounter, every setback, became a lesson absorbed and applied with remarkable speed. The U.S. Army had become more than a fighting force. It was a living, learning organism capable of shaping the course of the war. The lessons extend beyond military history. Adaptation under pressure, the integration of human skill with innovation, and the capacity to learn from failure are principles that resonate far beyond the battlefield. They offer a blueprint for leadership, problem-solving, and resilience in any endeavor. The story of the U.S. Army in World War II is a testament to the power of flexibility, the importance of preparation, and the enduring strength of human ingenuity. As the guns fell silent and the war drew to a close, one truth remained. Victory favored not just the strongest or the most numerous, but the fastest to learn, the quickest to adapt, and the most willing to transform. The U.S. Army of World War II was that force, an embodiment of adaptability, a model for generations to come, and a reminder that in the face of unimaginable challenges, the capacity to change is the ultimate weapon.